It all started when my parents dropped the bombshell over dinner one night. "We've decided to take your sister Emily on a family vacation to Hawaii this summer," my dad announced with a proud smile. I nearly choked on my meatloaf. "What? Why just Emily?" I sputtered, looking between my grinning parents in disbelief. At 18 years old, I was the oldest, with Emily being 16. We'd always gone on family vacations together before. My mom gave me an apologetic look. "Honey, you'll be leaving for college soon. This is a special graduation present for your sister before she starts her senior year." I opened my mouth to protest, but my dad raised his hand. "No arguing. You got to go on a big graduation trip when you finished high school." This is Emily's turn. A surge of resentment welled up inside me. My graduation trip had been a lame road trip to visit some boring national parks. But a luxury vacation to Hawaii? That was the opportunity of a lifetime that I was being denied. Over the next few weeks, my sourness only grew as I watched my parents meticulously plan every detail of the trip for my spoiled little sister. Emily pranced around the house, giddily looking at bikinis to pack and making lists of all the activities she wanted to do: snorkeling, surfing lessons, a luau. Meanwhile, I was stuck at my minimum wage job at the mall food court, saving up measly paychecks for college textbooks. The day finally came for them to leave for their 10-day Hawaiian paradise. I stood in the driveway, arms crossed, as my parents loaded up the trunk with suitcases. "We're going to miss you so much," my mom gushed, enveloping me in a tight hug. Her floral print muumuu reeked of sunscreen. "Yeah, whatever," I mumbled. Emily sidled up and made an obnoxious kissing face at me. "Don't be jealous, bro. Try not to have too much fun while I'm gone," she taunted in a saccharine tone. I clenched my fists, resisting the urge to shove her. After some last-minute hugs and goodbyes, they finally departed. I headed back into the empty house, settling onto the couch with a sullen feeling. For the next week and a half, it would just be me, some microwave dinners, and a lot of mind-numbing TV to pass the time. A few days into their vacation, my mom began sending me a constant stream of photos from Hawaii. Pictures of her and my dad, beverage in hand, on a powdery beach. Of Emily ziplining through a lush rainforest canopy. With every ping of my phone, a fresh pang of jealousy shot through me. Then, about halfway through the trip, the photos suddenly stopped. No more updates from paradise. When I tried calling my parents, it just rang and rang without answer. A knot began tying itself in my stomach. Had something gone wrong? The silence from Hawaii persisted for 2 more agonizing days. Then finally, my dad's number flashed on my phone's caller ID. With shaking hands, I answered the call, bracing myself for whatever bad news awaited. "Tyler!" My dad's voice sounded hoarse and strained. "We're dealing with a nightmare situation over here. Your sister has been arrested." My heart plummeted into my stomach. Arrested? What the hell did that spoiled brat do? "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising within me. My dad let out a haggard sigh. "It's a long story. We're at the police station now, trying to get it all sorted out. Just get ready, we'll likely need to fly back home earlier than planned." "But Dad, what did Emily do? Is she okay?" I persisted, a million worst-case scenarios racing through my mind. "She's physically fine," he replied wearily. "As for what she did, well, I'll explain everything when we get back. Just be prepared." With that ominous statement, the call ended abruptly. I stared at my phone, dumbfounded. What could my seemingly innocent little sister have possibly done to get herself arrested in Hawaii of all places? The next day, my sulking was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. I jumped up from the couch to see my disheveled parents trudging in, followed by Emily in handcuffs being escorted by a grim-faced police officer. "Emily Jasmine Matthews, you are hereby banned from the state of Hawaii," the officer stated, his voice laced with disdain. He uncuffed her and gave her a little shove into the house. "Good luck, folks. You're going to need it with this one." As the officer departed, an uneasy silence fell over the room. Emily stared at the floor, her face obscured by a curtain of tangled hair. My dad slowly met my incredulous gaze with a look of pure exhaustion and exasperation. "Son," he started, his voice trembling slightly. "You're not going to believe what your delinquent sister did on this trip." I leaned forward, bracing myself for the unbelievable details. Over the next hour, a astounding and cringeworthy tale unfolded of how my sweet little sister had transformed into a drunken, debauched nightmare over the course of just a few days in Hawaii. Over the next hour, an astounding and cringeworthy tale unfolded of how my sweet little sister had transformed into a drunken, debauched nightmare over the course of just a few days in Hawaii. It started off innocently enough. Emily met a group of older college guys at the hotel pool and began following them around like a love-struck puppy. My parents didn't think much of it at first, just a harmless teenage crush. But then things started escalating quickly. One night, Emily snuck out and tagged along with the older guys to a party at some rental house. She came stumbling back to the hotel at 4 a.m., reeking of cheap beer and vomit. When my enraged parents confronted her, she copped to drinking and confessed that she had made out with 2 different guys at the party. Appalled, they tried keeping a closer eye on her after that. But Emily just got more reckless and defiant. The next night, my dad caught her in the hotel bathroom with one of the college guys, both of them freebasing cocaine off the counter. All hell broke loose, furniture was smashed, the hotel staff got involved, and the authorities were called. As if that wasn't bad enough, it soon emerged that Emily had also been posting explicit photos of herself on adults-only websites, trying to run some kind of amateur porn scheme. My parents were mortified. Their baby girls and decent pictures were out there for the world to leer at. The final straw was when Emily got caught breaking into one of the guys' hotel rooms and stealing cash, a smartphone, and some other valuables. That's when the police arrived and finally apprehended my out-of-control, up-to-no-good sister. As my father recounted each sordid detail through strained voices and looks of utter humiliation, my initial feelings of jealousy took a back seat. Now I just felt disgustedly embarrassed for my family and kept wondering, who is this wildly unraveling train wreck of a girl, and what happened to my seemingly innocent little sister? Despite her tearful apologies, Emily was swiftly convicted on charges of prostitution, theft, drug possession, and destruction of private property. The judge took pity on her, opting for probation and court-ordered rehab instead of juvenile detention. But the damage had been done. We were now that family with a teenage rebel daughter from hell. On the silent plane ride back to our home state, I couldn't even look at Emily without an overwhelming mixture of anger, disappointment, and awkwardness washing over me. My mustard-stained food court uniform from work was starting to seem like a much better look than the walk of shame she had just subjected our entire family to. As we reunited with the rest of our mortified relatives at the airport, I knew this was just the beginning of a long, arduous journey to try and get Emily's life back on track. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come, as my father recounted each sordid detail through strained voices and looks of utter humiliation. The story of Emily's spectacular downward spiral in Hawaii took an even darker turn when he described the events leading up to her arrest. It happened on one of the last nights of their trip. Emily had once again snuck off to meet up with a group of older guys, lying to my parents that she was going to hang out with some girls she had met. Little did they know, she was actually tagging along with the guys to an underground party at a shady rental home. At this party, alcohol and drugs were flowing freely. Emily, having already developed a dangerous addiction at such a young age, indulged in both heavily. As the night raged on, she became increasingly intoxicated and belligerent. At one point, Emily got into a heated argument with one of the guys after he refused to buy more cocaine for her. Drunk and irrational, she flew into a rage, picked up a heavy crystal ashtray and smashed it over the guy's head, opening up a deep gash that required multiple staples to close. The party quickly devolved into chaos as people scrambled to subdue the suddenly violent Emily. In her drunken frenzy, she shattered windows, destroyed furniture, anything she could get her hands on. The police were called when she resisted furiously and bit one of the guys who tried to restrain her. When the authorities arrived and finally apprehended my out-of-control sister, the scene was one of utter carnage. She had to be hogtied and practically carried out to the police cruiser, leaving a trail of her own blood from struggling so intensely against the restraints. The damage she had caused to the rental home was extensive, over $10,000 worth of destruction and stolen items. Multiple people had to be treated for injuries from her erratic, violent outburst. The police described it as one of the worst cases of underage alcohol/drug-induced rampages they had ever encountered. Emily was promptly arrested and spent the remaining few days in jail, charged with felony aggravated assault, property destruction, theft, and multiple misdemeanors. My parents had to scramble to get her emergency bail and legal representation. As my dad recapped those horrific events with gut-wrenching detail and raw emotion, I realized my petty feelings of envy over missing out on this vacation were so small and meaningless compared to the seismic event that had shaken my family's world. My once innocent kid sister was mutating into someone entirely unrecognizable to us. In the aftermath, we were left to pick up the pieces: outstanding legal fees, restraining orders, a lengthy probation sentence, court-mandated rehab, therapy, and an agonizing uphill battle of trying to find a way to get Emily's life back on track before she spiraled even further out of control. In the aftermath of Emily's shocking arrest in Hawaii, we were left to pick up the pieces: outstanding legal fees, restraining orders, a lengthy probation sentence, court-mandated rehab, therapy, and an agonizing uphill battle of trying to get her life back on track before she spiraled even further out of control. At first, it seemed like the rehab and counseling were helping. Emily maintained her sobriety, stayed out of trouble, and seemed genuinely remorseful for the chaos she had caused. My parents and I started to feel cautiously optimistic that we could move past this nightmare. But just a few months later, Emily began regressing in an alarming way. She dropped out of her court-ordered outpatient program and started running with a new crowd, a group of defiant burnouts and lowlifes that embraced a sharp at the system mentality. Drugs, alcohol, and petty crimes crept back into the picture. One night, Emily didn't come home at all. She went off the rails again in a big way, ending up unconscious and hospitalized after an alleged overdose. While she initially claimed she had just taken too many sleeping pills and a cry for help, the truth eventually surfaced: she had been taking advantage of her new friend's connections and secretly using heroin and fentanyl. My parents were blindsided and utterly devastated by this relapse. All the progress they thought had been made came crumbling down in an instant. The fights, the sleepless nights, the constant worrying about where Emily was, and what kind of trouble she was getting into, it all started again with a vengeance. I did my best to tune out the chaos and focus on my first semester of college, but it hung over me like a dark cloud, making it impossible to enjoy my newfound freedom and independence. Every time my phone rang with a call from home, a pit of dread formed in my stomach, terrified of what fresh hell Emily had gotten herself into this time. The worst came when Emily got arrested again. This time for her involvement in an armed robbery of a gas station near our house. Turned out she had been dating an older felon recently released from prison, who had roped her into his crimes as a means to fuel their joint drug addictions. My once sweet, if misguided little sister was now facing serious jail time and life as a convicted felon if convicted. As my parents scrambled to get her an adequate legal defense, Emily hit them with an emotional nuclear bomb. She revealed she was pregnant with her criminal boyfriend's child. My jaw dropped when I heard the news from my mom through tears on the phone. At just 17 years old, Emily's life of reckless promiscuity and substance abuse had potentially disastrous consequences on the horizon. Despite everyone's objections, Emily decided to have the baby, convinced that maternal instincts would help her finally get her life together. But in the months after a difficult pregnancy and birth, she only continued her self-destructive downward spiral. It soon became clear that Emily was simply not capable of providing a safe environment for her newborn daughter. There were multiple calls to Child Protective Services over concerns of neglect, with Emily frequently abandoning the baby for days at a time to engage in her vices. Ultimately, the unbearable decision was made to legally terminate Emily's parental rights over her own daughter. As I watched my parents make the gut-wrenching choice to provide a better life for their grandchild, the heartbreak was etched on their faces, having to give up their daughter in order to save her child. In the aftermath of that devastating loss, Emily went on a year-long bender that burned the last remaining bridges with our family. There were more arrests, more stunts in and out of rehab programs, more failed drug tests, and despair. My parents practically disowned her, having reached their breaking point after so many dashed hopes and futile efforts. Finally, it was the shock of a near-fatal overdose that became Emily's rock bottom. She was found unconscious in a sketchy motel room, surrounded by needles and baggies of heroin. According to the paramedics, She was clinically dead for over 2 minutes before they were able to revive her. As my parents received the dreaded 3 a.m. call from the hospital, they braced for the worst. But miraculously, Emily pulled through, though she spent a week in the ICU to recover from severe respiratory distress and organ damage. When I visited her in the hospital, I was utterly shaken by how frail and gaunt she looked lying in that bed. The lively, vibrant girl I had once known was now reduced to a skeletal, hollow-eyed specter. Seeing Emily with IVs and tubes protruding from every angle truly hammered home how astonishingly self-destructive her downward spiral had become. It was a sobering wake-up call for all of us. We couldn't keep enabling this vicious cycle any longer. Something had to give before we ultimately lost Emily for good. The hospital staff solemnly warned that her brush with death would likely repeat itself if she didn't get intensive, residential treatment immediately. With no other choice, my parents made the agonizing decision to invoke a lockdown substance abuse treatment program in another state, one of those harsh, regimented facilities where Emily would be confined for months and have zero access to the outside world or her toxic enablers. The night before she was transported away, I pleaded with Emily one last time in the dimly lit kitchen of our home. Tears streamed down my face as I begged her to take this opportunity seriously and claw her way back from the unfathomable depths she had fallen into. Her response was a hollow, emotionless stare. Either the drugs had permanently numbed her, or she had simply given up. As I watched the unmarked van taking Emily away in shackles, it felt like we were sending her to prison rather than treatment. But at this point, maybe that highly controlled environment was the only thing that could save her life. We had reached the end of the line. It was institutionalization, or the consequences could turn permanently fatal. The first few months brought little progress. Emily remained in denial, lashing out at counselors, and constantly trying to circumvent the rules. My parents would hang up the phone utterly demoralized after her rare, venomous calls home. Then finally, something seemed to click after Emily hit rock bottom again within those facility walls. She had a reality check that no amount of lashing out or deceit could rescue her from the personal hell she had created for herself. Slowly, agonizingly, Emily started making progress. She completed group programs, showed commitment in one-on-one sessions, and reintegrated herself in alumni support groups. After nearly a year of being institutionalized, it was like a switch flipped. She was finally showing her authentic self again that had been dormant for so long. When Emily was eventually released from the program and arrived back home, I was admittedly still skeptical. Could this really be her final fresh start after too many aborted attempts to count? But as the months passed, her dedication to staying clean and improving herself lasted. She got a steady job, reconnected with positive friends, and even began taking classes at the community college. There were still struggles and temptations, of course, but Emily demonstrated an inspiring perseverance to keep pushing forward. On her 21st birthday, Emily surprised us all by getting her college degree after years of hard work and determination. As she proudly walked across that stage, my parents and I had tears streaming down our faces, a release of years of pent-up fear, trauma, and doubt finally giving way to profound relief and restore faith. While the scars of Emily's nightmarish battle will never fully heal, she has reclaimed her life and found her path. Against all odds, our family's never-ending nightmare finally gave way to a new dawn of hope and redemption. If Emily could overcome the depths she had fallen to, it showed anything was possible with courage and resolve. Fast forward a few more years, and Emily's amazing transformation and redemption story only continued. With her hard-earned degree, she landed a steady job at a non-profit organization, helping at-risk youth avoid falling into the same traps she had. Her unwavering commitment to her sobriety and personal growth opened up a new world of opportunities. One of the proudest moments for all of us came when Emily petitioned the court to regain her parental rights and reconnect with the daughter who was given up for adoption years earlier. Against long odds, she was successful. The reunions with her child, now a young girl, were incredibly emotional. I'll never forget seeing Emily holding her daughter in her arms again, both of them weeping tears of joy. While making up for years of being absent from her daughter's life wasn't easy, Emily established a strong bond. She became the doting, devoted mother that none of us ever dreamed possible during her lowest lows. Stability, responsibility, nurturing qualities she had been sorely lacking were now evident in her every loving interaction. My own relationship with Emily also experienced a healing I didn't anticipate. What started as protectiveness and resentment toward my troubled younger sister transformed into something far deeper: immense respect, admiration, and an inseparable bond. We had both traveled journeys of growing up, hers just infinitely more difficult and harrowing. At Emily's intimate beach wedding a couple of years later, I was the proud one giving a speech about her incredible strength and perseverance. As I raised my glass to toast the beaming bride and her new husband, a caring man who had helped pick up the pieces, I couldn't help but reflect on how this was the happy ending we had won against all odds. From that spoiled, reckless teenager who had been arrested and nearly destroyed her life addictions in Hawaii, Emily had clawed her way back to reclaim her future. She overcame her demons, rebuilt from rock bottom, and created the joyous life she once would have squandered. Whenever amid the loving way she now embraces her daughter, partners, or a newfound purpose helping others, I'm in awe. In the end, our family's long and traumatic saga has become indelibly self-affirming about the unshakable human resilience spirit. Just when we abandoned hope, Emily found the reservoirs of strength to battle back from true rock-bottom depths. Her inspirational journey reminds me that while we all undergo darkness, redemption, and a new dawn await those with the fortitude to seize it. No matter how impossible things seem, anything is possible for those brave enough to keep fighting.